Welcome to the School Transportation Nation podcast. I'm Ryan Gray, editor-in-chief of School Transportation News, joined here by Taylor Ekbatani, our associate editor. As always, School Transportation Nation is brought to you by Transfinder, the leader in school bus routing. Also joining them is the Propane Education and Research Council and Vera Mobility. Our guests a little bit later today are TSD keynote speaker, Betsey Helfrich. She's a special education attorney extraordinaire. Going to be talking to her about her keynotes and a general session that she's going to be facilitating in November in Frisco. Also going to be speaking with Monique Bryant, transportation director for Marshall Public Schools in Michigan, and one of the Transfinder top team winners that was awarded at STN Expo Reno in July. And before we start, here's a message from Propane Education and Research Council.
All right, guys, we have a great green tip for you this week, brought to you by the Propane Education Research Council. They want to talk to you about propane. It's energy for everyone. Did you know that school buses fueled by propane can help you reduce emissions in your community while saving you money? Propane school buses have a lower average carbon intensity than electric school buses over their lifetime by more than half, and they emit up to 96% less nitrogen oxide than diesel buses. All of this from fleets with the lowest total cost of ownership. It's no wonder propane is the most widely used alternative fuel in the school bus industry. You guys can learn more at betterourbuses.com. That's betterourbuses.com.
All right, we're back. And like I said, I'm joined by Taylor Ekbatani, our associate editor. Taylor, so it's September. Crazy to believe, right? We have our new issue out. What are some of the top stories that folks need to be checking out? I know a couple were written by a wonderful, wonderful reporter.
Wonderful.
Yes.
And obviously I'm biased, right? But for my articles, I looked at kind of the reporting and the data statistics kind of behind fatalities and injuries. And so that obviously plays into role with everything that's been kind of going on with Ohio, right? And looking at why the industry is kind of reactionary to these laws instead of proactive. You know, we always see the laws come after a tragedy. So the article kind of looks at that and dives into the statistics and the data behind injuries and fatalities a little bit more. And then my other article is looking at AI in the industry, which is a very interesting topic. I feel like a lot of people are kind of torn on AI and its capabilities. And so I kind of, do a deep dive with some people on the different ways that you can use artificial intelligence in school transportation, and whether that be through video cameras, routing, customer service. I kind of talk about each of these different segments and break it up a little bit to see how is this helping, how, what are some things to look out for. So those are the two articles that I did, Ryan, but it's a great book, very technology heavy, focused on a lot of school districts doing some great things.
Yeah, and you're talking about the AI. It's interesting you alluded to it. A lot of folks don't really understand what AI means, artificial intelligence. You ask, 10 different people, you're going to get 10 different answers, it feels like. So yeah, check out that article at stnonline.com. Really think about when you're talking about AI, machine learning. So there's a lot of technology out there that might be predicting or trying to predict things. It's not necessarily AI. It's all about actionable items that the technology is taking for the end user. So again, it's that learning aspect of machines. And like you mentioned, Taylor, that has a lot of people squeamish right now. You look at either folks thinking that they could end up being out of a job eventually, or just some of the privacy issues, transparency issues. I mean, we were joking about it before we started the podcast, Chat GPT. So many folks can plug information in there and it spits you out a really coherent, well-written article. And so certainly from a standpoint of journalism, that's a little bit scary. But, something that we found out even in Reno when we're talking about data security is, be very careful with AI, anything that you can, type into a database, if you will, and it's going to spit out an article. because if you're adding sensitive information, you're now opened yourself up and put that out for anybody to get. So certainly from a company standpoint, companies are looking at that and being very sensitive to their IP. But if you're, trying to write something, maybe like an internal memo for your drivers, for example, and you start mentioning specific conditions or certainly students, that would be an absolute no-no. So it's really something that everyone really needs to get educated on. So that article is a good place to start if you head over to stnonline.com again. Also, too, in September, we have our super users. So we have a few cover ladies this month from Cypress Fairbanks Independent School Districts in Houston, Texas. Boy, they are just, they get so much publicity because they're just doing so many great things. The largest student transportation provider in Texas, at least at a school district. But really looking at their tablet implementation that took place over the summer, new routing, they're going to be ramping up to a new student location app as well. So lots of great lessons learned there. And then we expand that article. So we're speaking to several districts. So go ahead and again, head over to stnonline.com to check that out. And Taylor, one of the news items that I saw last week actually goes back to over the summer. So Tony and I were recently talking about Wi-Fi, and the FCC had a proposal out there to open up comments about should school bus Wi-Fi hotspots be added to the E-rate federal program that's under the Communications Act. Up until now really has been to provide internet service to libraries and school classrooms or school buildings. Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel with FCC is looking to basically expand the Emergency Connectivity Fund, essentially to be a more of a long-term solution. That's run into some opposition, though. So a couple of Republicans in Congress have taken exception with that plan. Senator Ted Cruz from Texas, as well as Representative Kathy Morris Rogers. She's actually the chair of the Committee on Energy and Commerce in the House. They wrote to Rosenworcel in July, basically saying that her proposal could lead to essentially, going beyond Congress's intent on E-rate. And she wrote back actually a couple weeks ago, kind of outlining her position and the FCC's position. So it sounds like, there could be a delay in that. I know I was reading an article last week, Taylor from Education Week, that was saying that it hit a stumbling block. But have this response from Chairwoman Rosenworcel. Looks like they're going to still continue to move ahead. Just in terms of time frame, we're not quite sure what that means. So check out stnonline.com. We'll have an article on this, talking to some experts about what this all means. So stay tuned. Coming up next, I'm going to talk with TSD keynote Betsey Helfrich. But first, here's a message from Vera Mobility.
I want to bring you a message from our sponsor, Vera Mobility Crossing Guard Solutions. Guys, if you're concerned about safety for your students at school bus stops, are you struggling to force illegal passing incidents? Vera Mobility Crossing Guard Solution can help. Designed specifically for school bus safety, this turnkey solution reduces stop arm running and provides end-to-end support for transportation departments, school officials, and law enforcement. Crossing guard safety programs are violator funded, so there's no upfront cost to your school district or company. Visit veramobility.com/government to customize your school bus safety package today. That's VERRA mobility.com/government. Let's zero in on safety and keep our kids safe.
All right, welcome to the School Transportation Nation podcast stage. special education attorney Betsey Helfrich, who is returning for her third go-round at TSD conference in November with her keynote, Transportation of Special Education Students Avoiding the Bumps and Legal Hazards. Betsey, thank you so much for joining us today. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me. Nice to see you. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. Looking forward to having you back at TSD. So this is round 3. So for a lot of the folks out there who have not seen Betsey at TSD conference, I found Betsey, I guess it was about 2018. I was always looking for special education attorneys. We just had Julie Weatherly 2 years in a row at TSD. A great legal mind that Julie has. And so I was looking and seeing, well, who else is out there that we could pick their brains? And always go to LRP, which is the leading publication for special education attorneys specifically, and kept seeing this name come up. I was looking to see who presents for them and saw this Betsey Helfrich out of Missouri. And I thought, oh, that's close to Texas. And I've always been tutored by the great Peggy Burns, who for so many years was the legal mind in student transportation, who would always say, make sure they speak at LRP. So reached out to Betsey, and here we are.
Well, I'm glad you found me because I truly love presenting at TSD. I find your audience members to be some of the friendliest. They think I'm funny, which really matters. No, I'm just teasing, but I just think that there's such a warm audience, so welcoming, ask really thoughtful questions, and I learn every time I'm at TSD. So I think it's an awesome conference for everyone to attend. Whether you're a special ed director, a transportation director, or a general ed administrator, I just think it's an awesome thing that you put on.
Oh, thanks, Betsey. I appreciate that. It's a labor of love. And, with the legal presentations we do, always well attended. It just seems that, like you said, whether you're a special ed director, transportation, a therapist, that seems to really pack them in. Everyone wants to know, right, what cases they need to look out for. Everyone's worried about liability, right? Of course, there's the student safety aspect, which should be first and foremost.
Right.
But a lot of times cases never make it to trial, right? And that's going to be some of what we're going to be looking at. Actually, so I mentioned your keynote, Avoiding the Bumps and Legal Hazards. That's Friday, November 17th. Immediately following, we're going to have a special general session that you're going to facilitate.
Right.
It's going to include the aforementioned Peggy Burns. So yes, Peggy will be at TSD conference, everyone. News break, you heard it here first. She's going to be joining Sue Trump. So 2 of our tenured faculty advisors. We're probably going to have another school bus contractor representative on that panel. But Betsey, we're going to be looking at a recent case. Of course, it just happened over the summer. There was that New Jersey fatality. Right. A student choked to death on the school bus in a wheelchair. And it was reminiscent of a Hallmark case that really laid the groundwork for a lot of training as well as child safety restraint, proper usage in school buses, Susavage v. Bucks from 2002.
That's right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the panel and talking about all of those things. As you said, the New Jersey case from this summer is really tragic. The bus aide in that situation is looking at second-degree manslaughter charges and second-degree charges for endangering the welfare of a child. So what happened in New Jersey, which we'll be talking about in my keynote, and then I'm sure we'll hit the panel at TSD, is about a 6-year-old special needs. She needed a special harness to ride the bus safely. She also had a one-on-one aide on the bus, at least per the allegations. She was in a wheelchair in the back of the bus on her way to school, and her monitor allegedly was sitting fairly far away from her up front. And the allegation is that she was using her cell phone and was on her earbuds and was not necessarily paying attention to the student who ended up choking on her harness and did pass away. Again, terribly tragic, but those are the allegations. And now the aide is charged with criminal charges. And of course, this family is suffering greatly. So it does kind of harken back to the Susavage. And unfortunately, across the country, the cases we see with child injuries or even death related to harnesses and devices that perhaps aren't used correctly.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about Susavage, because I mentioned it, at the front, but that goes back to 2002. 2002, that was when the ruling came down.
Mhm.
The incident actually happened in 1999. So this is in Pennsylvania. What were some of the similarities there? And then there obviously were some differences too.
Right. Obviously, another just total tragedy. You feel for everybody in these situations, including everyone on those buses and, of course, the family. But in Susavage, again, like you said, Ryan, it was 1999. A child with special needs. She had a seizure disorder and some musculoskeletal issues as well. She was unable to sit upright by herself. She was starting school and wanted to enroll in Bucks County School District in Pennsylvania. She needed a specialized placement, though. So the school, they had an IEP meeting, and they arranged for her to go to a private school for students with disabilities who were younger. So that was all set up, but she needed transportation. So her doctor weighed in. There was a lot going on, some discussions, but she obviously needed some specialized equipment to ride safely. So they ordered her a adaptive car seat, so to speak, a device she would sit in. While that was on order, they did advise, at least somebody advised down the line, that she have an aide with her on the bus. And then they were going to use a harness on the bus to help hold her upright on her way to school. What happened, though, is they were using a 4-point harness instead of a 5-point harness, which would have had a strap that went between her legs, which could have helped keep her upright. Well, also, the 4-point harness was installed backwards on her, and it zipped up, and it was unfortunately cutting off her airway. So some point during the ride, and they later alleged that only 2 of the 4 harnesses were even strapped as well. So some point during the ride, the student slumped down, was unable to correct her posture, and she was strangled by the harness, and unfortunately was unconscious in a coma for a while and then passed away. So terribly, terribly tragic story. Of course, there is the parents, on behalf of their child's estate, filed a lawsuit against the Bucks County School District, the private school, the transportation company, because Bucks County contracted with a private company to provide transportation. Lots of claims, lots of federal claims. And then the decision by the court came out, as you said, Ryan, in 2002, and really provided some interesting takes on the constitutional claims, 1983 claims, who can be liable, what was the IEP team's role, the harness, did the state create a danger? They really dove into some of these issues and what is deliberate indifference. What could the school have done differently? And ultimately, this case proceeded on. It wasn't dismissed. Bucks County was trying to get it dismissed. And the opinion that you see that we talk about was the judge saying, no, this is not going to be dismissed. I assume it settled for a lot of money later. I don't know that information, but maybe some of our panelists might know later what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, certainly 2 of our panelists were heavily involved. One of which, Sue Schutrump, was involved with the case itself, along with Linda Bluth, another of our tenured faculty members. Unfortunately, Linda will be unable to come to TSD, but she's actually writing on this topic in our October issue. So stay tuned for that, all you readers out there. But back to the cases. So I was mentioning there were some similarities and some differences.
Yeah.
So the similarities we're talking about, these were using contractors, so third-party school bus operators. So a lot came out of Susavage, where certainly the judge found the school bus company was negligent, but it was also one of those hallmark cases that really, shone a light on the school districts and lack of oversight, and saying, hey, just because you outsource your transportation, you can't wash your hands.
It's not always a defense, right, that we use an independent contractor. The court really looked at the fact that this was our harness. It was Bucks County's harness. It wasn't the independent contractor's harness. It was our harness, and we gave it to them without instruction or training. I say we, but I'm talking for Bucks County. They really focused on that it's not an absolute bar to liability if we contract with an outside provider. We still have an obligation. And I would say under the IDEA, really the buck usually always stops with the school that is in charge of the student. We are responsible for FAPE. What we put in that IEP matters. And the court went into that a little bit, that the IEP had no instruction for how this harness was supposed to be used, how she was supposed to be safely transported. At some point, a doctor recommended that she have an aide on the bus. There was no aide on the bus in Susavage. In New Jersey, one of the differences, there was an aide on the bus. Unfortunately, that's the allegation, though, is that the aide was negligent by playing on her phone. Some of the other similarities, what I assume we'll see in New Jersey, is in Susavage, one of the claims was a failure to train claim. And you see that in some 1983 federal claim cases, saying that the school district, no matter who was responsible down the line, you had a duty to train those people who needed to know to do their job properly, and you didn't. And again, we could train at schools every day, all day. It feels like all we do is train. But particularly when it comes to student safety, I just don't think you can overstep it. You train all the time, document, keep documentation of it. And the court really analyzed that failure to train claim and said it could go forward.
So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things I was going to mention too is in that case the judge faulted the IEP team specifically, and you mentioned why. But in terms of that training too, you also just hit on it, the importance of documenting it, because what happens, and this happens all too often. I'm sure you see it a lot, reflected in some of the cases that are before you and that you research. But where something tragic like Susavage happens, and it spurs all this new training. And I know Peggy and Sue were heavily involved, as well as Linda, in that training for Bucks in the aftermath. But then, fast forward, it's almost 25 years later, almost, that it happened, almost to the day. And, a lot of this stuff, from what I'm hearing, has been lost. So, you're talking about the importance of documentation. How can districts, or what should they be doing in terms of just, dotting all their I's and crossing all their T's to make sure that this training lives on? Because we know there's turnover. Folks are retiring. How are they safeguarding the future?
Right. Something to consider too is with your training in harnesses is having the manufacturer or a representative from the manufacturer come out, because a lot of the claims that you see is this device wasn't faulty, we weren't using it properly. And that's hard to overcome a tort claim or a negligence claim of you just didn't use the device properly. So maybe considering having some training from the manufacturer, or the video you could watch. What I see is a lot of bus barns or transportation departments watching a video, but they watch it all together at back to school time. Keep a sign-in sheet. It's hard later to say the entire transportation department did watch this video on August 15th at back to school time, but you don't know if bus driver Bob happened to be there that day. So you have to keep a specific sign-in of what you watched and who watched it. And also training about communication. A lot of these claims and these tragedies can come back to who told who what. Were we too afraid? Was the nurse too afraid of HIPAA to share information with the bus driver that they needed to know about this child's condition? Or was the IEP team not thinking all the way through that they needed to share this information with the bus aide? So really, how do we communicate? How do we make sure new people are trained on what they should have if they come later? What about substitute drivers that aren't used to that route or that device? How are they being trained? So some sort of process or identifying who's in charge of making sure all the new people get all the pieces of information that they need. It's really key. And a lot of it comes back down to communication.
Absolutely. And you just hit on HIPAA. So HIPAA is the protection right of medical records. Can you talk a little bit about the intersection, or maybe also the differences between HIPAA and another acronym that we deal with, especially, probably more so in the schools, FERPA?
Absolutely. So this will be part of my keynote. I train on this every time I train with transportation personnel, because I think it's so important to understand the difference. And there's so much, I would say, myths or miscommunication out there between what is HIPAA and what's FERPA. The Department of Health and Human Services actually has a really good guide. You could Google it, and I'll have a link to it in my presentation about the difference between HIPAA and FERPA in schools. But the bottom line is FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, is really our guiding light when it comes to student records, even if it's a record from a doctor that we've received. Once we take possession of it, FERPA controls, and we can share information with FERPA with those who have a legitimate educational interest. So somebody who needs that information to do their job. The FERPA regulations specifically include contractors in the definition of a school official. So even if we contract with an outside private bus company, we can share health information with them if we feel that they need that information to do their job. And in fact, we should. HIPAA may apply if we're transmitting records, if we have a clinic that we're seeing patients. Some schools are starting to do that now. But in general, your transportation department shouldn't be worried too much about HIPAA. We have the right to know that information under FERPA to keep kids safe. So again, more on that coming in my keynote, and we'll probably hit on it a little in the panel as well.
Okay. And so, when we're talking about avoiding the bumps and legal hazards, certainly, we don't have enough time to certainly go through all of those bumps today in this podcast. You're going to, dive into those with your keynote. But one of them at the forefront of student transportation is specifically transporting students with disabilities, as well as students who are experiencing homelessness, is the rise in transportation network companies and what's called quote unquote alternative transportation providers, where they're non-yellow school bus.
Right.
So, the TNCs are more that kind of like, for lack of a better term, Uber or Lyft for kids.
Right.
Oversimplifying it, overgeneralizing it, sure. And then we have the alternative transportation companies. From a legal standpoint, what are some of the concerns maybe that you see, or what do you see out there in terms of bumps, legal hazards, anything maybe in case law yet, or is it too soon?
It's probably too soon. The courts are always slow to catch up. Like, we're just now getting some decisions about COVID and how that impacted students with disabilities during the time of closure. So now you're talking about 3 years ago. And what's interesting, in Missouri, we don't see as many of those services in companies at play as we might in bigger cities. But especially with students with special needs, the concern would be, what do those drivers know about that child? Do they have a behavior intervention plan that they're supposed to de-escalate first if they get agitated on that ride? Is it a different driver every day? Can we really control that? Is the student with a disability getting a longer route than non-disabled peers? There's so much to think about now. It can be overwhelming. And I know transportation departments are literally doing their best right now with not enough drivers. But I think, again, it goes back to communication with the parent, the IEP team, and deciding what's the best way to get this kid to school safely. And if it is a service as you described, what's the plan to make sure that student gets what they need during the ride? And what do we need to share with that company so they know what they need to know?
Absolutely.
Get parent consent. Some schools get really wiggly about, we can't share it with this company, this temporary company. Parental consent can cure everything. So when in doubt, if you feel wiggly or nervous about sharing information with drivers, get a release from the parent that you can, and then you're 100% going to be okay.
Yeah, great. Well, we're really looking forward to not only seeing you in person again, Betsey, but you're always entertaining, always have such great information. Folks, if you haven't already, you can register to see Betsey and her friends at TSD in Frisco in November. Just head over to tsdconference.com and you'll find all the information. So Betsey, again, it's a pleasure, and looking forward to seeing you in a couple months.
I cannot wait. And hopefully by the time I see you guys in November, we have the updated proposed 504 regulations. We've been waiting on them with bated breath.
Ooh.
And hopefully I'll have something to share on that by the time November comes around. But I literally can't wait to see you guys in Frisco.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Betsey.
Thanks.
All right. Now I'm talking to top teams winner Monique Bryant of Marshall Public Schools in Michigan. Let's welcome to the School Transportation Nation podcast stage, Monique Bryant, the Transportation Director for Marshall Public Schools in Michigan. Monique, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So you are on the podcast today to talk about your team there at Marshall Public Schools. You guys are a little bit east of Kalamazoo and Battle Creek in Michigan, and you were out in STN Expo Reno last month to receive an award, the Top Teams Award, the inaugural Top Teams Award from Transfinder, and you were on a panel. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Monique. I understand that you're going on your third year now as the Director of Transportation. You previously were a school bus driver there at Marshall Public Schools, and now you're the director. So first of all, tell us, our readers, a little bit about you, how you transitioned from school bus driver to director.
So my director of transportation at the time that I was a school bus driver. Before I was probably like my second year as a driver, we had a Christmas gathering before we went on Christmas break. And he had mentioned to me one day when I retire, you'll probably be the one to take over my job. And I never really thought too much about it. But after he said that, I kind of was interested in it and to figure out all of the techniques and things to go along with that. I first and foremost love being a bus driver. I will always be a bus driver at heart. I really enjoy the kids, and I really enjoy our district. I love driving the bus, and I love my job now. Fortunately, we are staffed, so I won't be in a bus as much this year. My last 2 years, I've been driving full time and doing my director work. So that was a little bit rough around the edges. Transitioning from bus driver to director was a difficult challenge, not just for myself, but for our staff. So I had to earn their trust and show them that I could handle the job and let them know that I was there for them and what they needed. So that was a little bit of work also.
Wow. So, we were talking a little bit before we started recording. You went from being the friend and coworker,
right,
to being the boss lady, right? So, and in terms of the challenges, I'm sure was probably at the forefront of those.
Because in the very beginning, the drivers were not happy about it. They just were. I think they were scared. They were anxious. I had all the same emotions as them, and I went from most of them were my friends from work, and it was just like a change once they knew I was taking over this position. It was so hard for all of us, but with a little bit of work, a lot of commitment and time, I couldn't even imagine the way that it was 2 years ago. Phenomenal.
So what was the culture like when you were a driver? And now, obviously, you guys won an award for the culture now. So was there a big change? Has it been status quo? Was the culture bad?
It was a little, I would say. There was a little bit of drama. There was, normal things at any workplace, I feel like. We were less of a team, and that was a big thing. We didn't work together as much. And now, moving forward, and now talking about right now, I say we have the best team because we all work together. We're all there for each other. Anyone needs help, they are on that radio ready to help. We work together. We're more like a family than a team.
Mm-hmm. So how did you go about affecting that? So, you obviously, when you were a driver and you lived through some of those, that drama, if you mentioned, you obviously had some ideas already of, maybe what you could do to fix it or what you would do differently. Now you're thrust into that director's chair. Kind of on day one, what was the first thing you tried to tackle when it came to the culture and that drama?
Communication, making sure that we're all on the same page. We're all here to do the same job, and our number one top priority is keeping our students safe to and from school and in between for every activity. So communication was the biggest thing that we lacked, I worked really hard on. And now, we have weekly messages that go out. I send an update on Sundays of just reminders or updates or anything that's happening for the week, the expectations. We have monthly meetings. We didn't have those things before.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of transitioning from school bus driver straight to director, what were some of the things that you personally had to really learn? Was it more on the maintenance side, fleet management?
A little bit of everything, but learning to kind of stay strong and know my place. Sometimes I, forget still to this day. I don't really like to be considered as the supervisor as much as I'm the leader. I don't really want to be the boss lady. So sometimes I have to put that in effect, but that is very rare. So I like to be the head of our team and the leader of them more than just, I don't like them to just look at me as the boss. I'm the rule maker. They can come to me. I have an open door policy, so they can come to me for things at work, whatever.
And being a former driver, like many folks in this industry, I mean, the majority of leaders like yourself in school transportation, they did get their start as school bus drivers. Maybe they transitioned and had other steps along the way. They didn't just go from driver to the director chair. But, what have you used from your experience as a driver to maybe make things better? You talked about the communication, but are there other aspects of actually driving the bus or training that you always thought, hey, I wish we did it this way? And you guys maybe would talk about it in the break room or after work.
Absolutely. And a lot of times what I do now, sometimes I will answer too quickly. And then I will think about it. I put myself in their shoes and I remember what it was like for a bus stop or something on their bus or a change, within the department. I always try to put myself in their shoes and remember oh yeah, this is how I would feel,
Mm-hmm. In terms of, how big of an operation do you have? How many staff do you have? How many drivers? You said you had to step in and drive a lot the last couple of years, but don't have to this year.
We have a full house this year. So we are fully staffed right now. And in the past, I had about 24 to 25 people. This year, I have 30.
Okay. And how many of those are drivers?
22 of them.
Okay. So then do you have one fleet manager or a lead technician?
I have a routing person and a dispatch coordinator as well.
Okay. So how did you become fully staffed with all your drivers?
It took some time, but we did Facebook posting and had all of my team share. We did a job fair. Job fairs are not that successful, but we put postings everywhere in both of our cities, Albion and Marshall, and word of mouth, talking and having our drivers talk about how great our team is. Winning top transportation team was very helpful. Also having a new fleet, like having new buses is a big deal, and having the team that we have, but definitely putting in the work. We have flyers, we have signs in people's yards, we have lots of postings everywhere. And all of us, not just me, but my whole team, finding people that are retired people, that are parents that need work, that are stay-at-home parents, or we also offer retirement and a pension. So that's a big one because there's schools around us that have privatized. So people want to make sure that when they retire, they're set. So that has been helpful as well. But just a lot of putting in the work to get the drivers. Word of mouth is big, and Facebook is very helpful.
Okay. Now, in terms of wish lists, so you guys are an inaugural winner of the Transfinder Top Team Award, one of 6, one of 4 districts nationwide. Now, in terms of the wish list for what's next, what are you guys looking at trying to do differently at your district?
Well, what we just did do is we got 11 new buses, okay. 7 brand new buses, and then 4 new to us, but used, but with low miles. We got bigger buses to accommodate our other city that we transport, which is Albion. And so we got 90 passenger buses, and we already had 84 passengers, and that's really exciting. The drivers drive them, and it's incredible to me. They're huge. And then we have 77 passengers, and then we have 71 passengers.
Okay. So the 90 passengers are transit, I would take it.
Yes.
Now, what about electric buses? I know there's been a big movement in Michigan to have electric buses, that big pilot program. And now there's another $125 million that's being made available. Of course, EPA just last week, we wrapped up the grant period for the competitive program. But where do you guys stand right now in terms of either electric buses or greener buses?
Well, we cover about 168 square miles. So we have a pretty large district. I know there's schools out there with a lot more. I learned that at the expo, but right now we are more leaning towards staying with our diesel buses than going green.
Gotcha. Are you guys concerned at all about prices? I mean, regardless of electric buses or not, we're seeing the prices of new buses skyrocket. So I'm curious, you just brought in, or you just, I guess, purchased, or did you receive the 7 new buses? What did they cost compared to the last round?
Quite a bit. I would say a little bit more. Do you want the price of all of them put together, like what we spent?
Just in general, like, I mean, have you seen like a percent increase from like what, you were paying before?
I would say approximately somewhere around 20,000 more.
Okay.
But that does include like the warranty on that.
Gotcha. And then in terms of technology, what are you guys consuming, if you will, in terms of technology? Where do you guys need to go? Where are you sensing as the leader that you need to go with technology?
So we just purchased new camera systems with REI, but we have a routing software and it's not where it needs to be. So we're hoping to move forward with Transfinder sooner than later. My district has been talking about it. So it won't happen this year, but I'm hoping that we will move forward by next year.
What are you looking to accomplish with your routing system?
Being able to make the routes and have them stay the way that we put them in with the times. The routing software that we have right now, the biggest issue is the speed on that software. It only lets you pick one speed. And we have buses that go on a highway. We have rural areas. I mean, we have lots of different speed limits. So it will like flag us if we try to put in the time that we're actually at the bus stop, because it doesn't work with the time that it's supposed to be with the speed that we pick.
Gotcha. All right, Monique. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. Congratulations to you and to your entire team there at Marshall, and happy start to the school year. I know you said it started off very well, so I think that's a reflection again on the culture there.
Yes.
And, may you have a safe rest of the week and rest of the school year.
I do want to just add something I just wanted to talk about the beginning of this week. We really did. I'm very fortunate because we rocked out this week. Our first week of school, our first day of school went very, very well. Our kids all got home safely at a very good time. And the biggest thing is I could not do my job without my drivers and without my staff. So they are the reason why, we were part of the top transportation teams, and we're very grateful. And I couldn't be me without them.
Absolutely. And again, we've talked, there's always startup issues every year. Unfortunately, there were some pretty big issues that happened nationwide. And again, it's a reflection on your leadership and the good things that are happening there at Marshall. So congratulations again. And congratulations to the entire team.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Monique and Betsey, and of course, Taylor Ekbatani, our associate editor, for joining me on this episode. We also appreciate today's sponsors, Transfinder, the Propane Education and Research Council, and Vera Mobility. Certainly keep tuned to stnonline.com for all the news and latest analysis on the school transportation industry. And again, our TSD conference is coming up in November. You can head over to tsdconference.com, register today. You can save some money on registration if you act by October 13th. So head over there, read more about Betsey and what she's going to be talking about, and get updates on our full agenda. Subscribe to the School Transportation Nation podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you consume podcasts to get that new weekly episode directly on your phone. Thanks so much, Nation. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great week.